Awesome. So again, thank you everybody so much for coming. I know this is late on a Monday when everyone's probably just trying to get back in the groove of things after a hopefully restful long weekend. I think everyone knows me, but in case they don't, my name is Ilana Drew. I'm the Director for Partnerships and Student Recruitment at College for Social Innovation, and came up with this idea to kind of put this evening together because we've had a lot of, between our staff and current fellows and past fellows, a lot of people have talked about grad school and shown some interest. So we thought it would be fun just to look, we looked around and we had some awesome resources here that we thought we could pull together to give everyone kind of an overview of the process and what might go into your decision. So we're going to start by hearing a little bit from Devin Cruz about the grad school admissions process. Then we're going to move into a panel with some former CFSI alumni that are currently in grad school. And then we're going to hear from Dan Bromberg at UNH about a special program that we have in collaboration with UNH's Carsey School. So first, I'm going to start with Devin. In addition to being the Associate Director for Student Recruitment and Enrollment at CFSI, Devin also has worked in college admissions for more than 14 years, including 7 years full-time at Hampshire College and 6 years working for an independent college consulting firm, guiding applicants through the application process. She's also reviewed applications for Amherst College and the prestigious Questbridge Scholarship Program. So Devin, let's take it away.
Yeah, you did a great job of dropping the H from Amherst.
Did I actually?
Impressed. You did. You didn't say the H. So, hi, you all know me. I'm Devin. And so I want to be, I guess, clear, first of all, that most of my work in admissions has been in undergrad admissions. And so definitely keep that in mind while I am talking. That said, I think that there's a lot of sort of transferable things that go on between undergrad and graduate admissions. The advice that I'm about to give you, I think, boils down to two things, which is one, read instructions, and two, proofread. You're going to hear me say that a lot throughout the next, I guess I have 10 minutes, maybe a little bit less than that. And obviously open to questions if anybody has anything. So when you're starting to think about applying to grad school, you're going to be thinking about a sort of like application season between October and late December, with every school obviously having their own admissions deadlines. So that's the first piece of instruction that you want to follow, is when you start to think about programs, really taking a look at when applications are due so that you can do some backwards planning in terms of when you need to start writing things, when you need to start taking tests, and when you need to start asking for recommendations. Unfortunately, unlike when you applied to undergrad, there is no one application that is universal for graduate programs. So a lot of you, when you applied to undergrad programs, very likely use the common application, which means you can fill out one application and then you can apply to like 20 schools at the same time. That doesn't exist for grad schools. And so you are in the process of thinking about time planning, going to want, to think about the fact that you're going to be filling out multiple applications. You can't just fill out the one and have it sent everywhere. The other thing you're going to want to think about when you start to think about that is the fact that most applications cost you money to send. So definitely work that into your planning as well. A lot of schools will also offer fee waivers, and they might have the instructions for how to get a fee waiver on their admissions website. So keep that in mind too. What are grad schools looking for? A lot of the same things that undergraduate institutions were looking for when they looked at your application. For your bachelor's, they want to see academic success, they want to see motivation, they want to see that you have a strong work ethic, that you are a leader or involved in some sort of leadership in your community or your school. The thing that is a little bit different at the grad school level is that you are also really going to need to get across the fact that you're particularly passionate about this specialized field. So by the time you're applying to graduate school, you're applying to something generally very specialized. And grad schools want to know why. Like, why is it this thing that you're interested in? And so we'll talk a little bit about how you can get that across in your application. But that's not necessarily something that you had to do on an undergraduate application unless you're applying to a particularly like specific program for that as well. But you're putting in a lot of time in a specialized field, so they want to know why. One of the other major differences here in the admissions process is that faculty tend to be more involved in the graduate admissions process. That depends from school to school, but especially in like a PhD program, the faculty are highly involved in selection of applicants, as opposed to undergrad institutions where faculty generally don't look at applications unless it's like a specialized music program, something like that. So there are quite a few things that you have to sort of piece together in order to put your application together. So I'm just going to touch on each one of them quickly. The first is your transcripts. So you have to request your transcripts from each undergraduate institution that you've been to. Some of you, if you were at a school that is a university of record relationship with us, wherever you are applying to grad school might require that you request your semester in the city semester transcript from UNH. So keep that in mind as well. And you can generally go to the registrar's office at your home institution or home institutions to find out how to request a transcript. That can take anywhere from 1 day at UNH. Sometimes they like get transcripts out the door within 24 hours to some schools will say 5 to 10 business days. So you want to keep in mind that that's something that you need to do pretty far in advance of an application deadline. And schools will generally not take unofficial transcripts. So they have to come directly from the registrar's office. You can't just scan them a copy of what you have. My least favorite part of any admissions process is standardized testing. And a lot of grad schools still require that you take the GRE, which is the graduate record examination. I have taken it. Ilana, I don't know if you took that or if you took the MAT.
I took it.
It's a large, yeah, so it's a big test, right? And it's not super fun. It does a lot of the same things that the SAT does. So it's testing math, reading, and writing. There are a few different sections. If you're applying to a specialized program like med school, law school, there's then also other tests you have to take, so like the MCAT or the LSAT. So you want to make sure that you're taking the right test. So definitely like take a look at your admissions application to see what they're looking for. But if you're applying to a school that's not super specialized, it's likely the GRE. It's expensive. It could be the test, I don't know the exact number right now, but it's somewhere between $275 and like $315 to take the GRE. So what you don't want to do is take it without studying. You don't want to just sit down in front of, it's all computer-based now, the GRE. You don't want to just sit down in front of your computer in this like sterile testing environment without having thought about particularly test strategy and without having retaught yourself math. That was not something that you did a lot of in undergrad. There are quite a few free test prep resources on the internet. ETS, which is the company that actually does the GRE, that like offers the GRE, they have some free practice tests, free prep materials. So I definitely recommend that you do those things before you sit down to take the test. At the very least, looking at test strategy, because you want to know, should you leave questions blank? Should you skip sections? Like there are some things that you should just need or should think about before you sit down to take the test. I definitely recommend, aside from the online prep materials, that you just get one of the big GRE, how to take it, here's practice exams books that you can find at any bookstore and just like work your way through it. Letters of recommendation are also something you're going to need. That number ranges for institutions. Some don't require any, some require 3. It really depends on where you're applying. So again, be sure that you're following directions. You want to ask professors at least 2 months in advance of the application deadline if they would write something for you. And you should be prepared for them to say, yes, and also I'd like the following from you. an update on what you've been doing, if it's been a while since you graduated, a resume. If you've been in another academic program, a transcript, they're probably going to ask you for some information so that they can think about what they're going to write. And this is sort of a silly small piece of information, but on your application, you should waive your right to see the letter. So the grad school application will say, do you waive your right to see this letter of recommendation? You should say yes. Technically, you have the right to see every letter of recommendation written for you because it ends up as part of your academic file. And there's a federal law that says that you can see it, but schools will not take it as seriously if you have not waived your right to see it, because they'll be afraid that the professor knows you're going to see the letter and therefore they have not written honestly. So keep that in mind. Often you'll also be required to send in a resume, which you have because you've been with us. So just be sure that's updated in the process. And then the last piece of information you're going to have to send in is something that you've written. And like this varies again from program to program and school to school. Usually it's called a statement of purpose or something to that effect. Definitely look at the instructions for which schools you're applying to, and what exactly they are looking for. Often it's a few different things. So why are you interested in this program? What sparked your interest in this particular area of study? How will this help you reach your career goals? How has your background inspired you or prepped you to be in this particular program? And some major accomplishments, perhaps, that you've made both academically and outside the classroom. Those all belong generally in a statement of purpose, but what you really want to be getting across is why is it this area of study that you're interested in, and why is it this school that you're interested in? So if you're applying to CARSI, for example, like what are some things there that you're particularly interested in? Why is it the right place for you to be to study what you want to study? You're thinking about writing like, why do they want you and why do you want them? Those generally both belong in that sort of essay. Proofreading is super important. Get somebody else to read it, a parent, a friend, like somebody who's a good editor. And my last piece of advice for that is if I knew you and there was a random pile of essays on the floor and I like picked one out, I should be able to tell that it's yours even if your name isn't on it. So like thinking about it being really personal and talking a lot about who you are and why you want to do what you're interested in. So those are the 6 things, I guess, that you will have to send in that you're going to want to start to think about sooner rather than later if you're thinking about applying. I can take questions now or later, Elena. It's up to you.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was super helpful. I think if anyone has any questions, we can just feel free to popcorn style shout any out. And also we'll send out this video afterwards. And if you have any questions additionally, you can reply to the email and we can make sure that we get you the answers as well. Anything?
No, it's thrilling stuff, so.
I will say, like, I do not have a vast experience of applying to grad schools because I only applied to and went to one. But I have heard of people requesting to waive GRE requirements. And I feel like 100% of the time that is worth at least asking, because if you can avoid doing that, then feel free, then that's probably going to be ideal.
I've actually heard about that too. And the other thing I was going to say, which is actually in opposition to what you just said, if a school says the GRE is recommended, you should take it. Like, unless you call and specifically ask to have it waived, anytime a school says something is recommended, even if it says it's not required, you should do it and send it in. So just keep that in mind.
I would say for CARSI right now, we are waiving the GRE just for COVID-related purposes at this point. So that's kind of been happening for the last 9 months or so. I don't know how many UNH students are on this, but UNH students it gets waived for as well. The one benefit I would say is if we're not familiar with your undergraduate institution, it does give us some information. We definitely do not put that much weight into the GRE, but it is a point of reference if we are just not familiar with your undergraduate institution. It's certainly helpful.
That makes sense, definitely. Thanks, Dan, for that context. I also will say that I was extremely excited because I studied a lot of vocabulary words, and then like 10 months into grad school, I actually saw the word ameliorate in a sentence, and I was so excited that one of the vocab words that I had studied actually popped up in some context. Awesome. So I think what we'll do is shift to the panel and kind of save all the questions for the end. I do see your Stephanie, so we'll get to you right at the end of the session. But first, I would love for Jackie, Andriana, and Erica to take turns saying your name, when you, where you went to undergrad and what your major was, when you came to semester in the city and what your internship was, and then where you're going to grad school and what degree you're pursuing. So Jackie, I see you first. If you can remember those, feel free to hop in.
Yeah, I'm Jackie. I did my undergrad at the University of Vermont. I did semester in the city last fall, so right before COVID. I did my internship at Green City Growers. I think Casey, was it you who did Green City Growers as well? Yeah, a really great experience. I was also a CA during that time. And then I went on to be a ambassador for the program afterwards. And I applied to the University of Vermont Sustainable Innovation MBA program right after I left the program, I believe. I think my experience with Green City Growers definitely helped to solidify that I wanted to apply to grad school, and also the pandemic as well. I think that was all of the questions, right? Was there something else I was missing?
You got it. We'll get to more details in the rest of the panel. Thanks, Jackie. Erica, how about you go next? If you don't remember what I asked for, I can say it again.
Okay, so my name is Erica. I did my undergrad at UMass Dartmouth. I was a crime and justice studies major. I was the same year as Jackie for the College for Social Innovation, so I think it was fall 2019, sounds about right. Yeah, okay. And I think during that time, I was also applying to get into my master's program. So right now I'm doing a master's in social work at Simmons University in Boston. And I was at PBS Learning Institute, which is in Braintree, and they essentially like work with kids that are in the juvenile justice system.
Awesome, thanks. And last but certainly not least, Andriana.
Hi, I'm Adriana. Oh man, what were the questions again?
Where you did undergrad and what your major was there, when you were with semester in the city and where you interned, and then where you're doing grad school now and what degree you're pursuing.
Okay, so I went to Clark University for undergrad. I majored in psychology and minored in management. I did semester in the city in fall 2018, and then was an ambassador for a year, and then worked at CFSI for 7 months. So I stopped working there in July, so some of you might recognize me. So I did the 5th year program at Clark, so I just graduated from that in May. So it was like a 1.5-year program. And I did that in communications.
Awesome, thanks, Andriana. So I'd love to hear sort of from each of you, when you were deciding what you were gonna do after undergrad, what made you decide to jump straight into grad school? And anyone can jump in.
I can start, or
no, go for it.
So I came into Clark as a biochemistry pre-med track, and I like almost failed like all of my classes that first semester. So like going to a liberal arts school is like really good because you can take a bunch of different classes and it's like required to do that. So I took a communications class like the following semester and realized that I really liked it. But the thing is, they were changing the major, so we weren't going to have a communications major anymore, but we still had the grad program. So I decided to major in psychology instead because that was another area of interest, and already decided that I was going to go to grad school since my freshman year, which was kind of crazy in my opinion. And then I was actually accepted my junior year because you start your grad classes in your senior year. So I did semester in the city for that first semester of my senior year, and then started my grad program.
Awesome. Thanks, Andriana. Erica, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so for me, I went into like crime and justice studies, and I kind of wanted to, like, I started with that because of the whole Black Lives Matter movement. And so that's why I got into crime and justice studies. And then through that, I took a class inside a prison a few times, and then sort of just being in that environment and interacting with the men that were incarcerated kind of got me into like, I want to, like, how can I help these people sort of more than just like what a correctional officer does, because that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to like go in as someone known as like a punisher. I wanted to do something more positive. And so also like CFSI helped me a lot through connecting me to different social workers. So I did a lot of informational interviews because I really also wanted to work potentially with DYS, which is Department of Youth Services. And so I did a lot of informational interviews, and that really solidified for me wanting to go into social work school. So this is my first semester in social work school, and I don't regret it. I love it. It's definitely different. But yeah, that's sort of kind of where I went, and I'm really enjoying it.
Awesome. Thank you. How about for you, Jackie? You touched on this a little bit.
Yeah, well, I guess before I came to a semester in the city, I had a very strong sustainability, environmental background as an environmental studies major. And then when I came to Boston and I did my internship with semester in the city, I had a great time going to business meetings with my mentor and kind of just hearing about business strategy from his perspective. And I'd already taken like some econ classes, and I thought that that would be like a great point of change for sustainability and the environment. And at the end of my internship, I got a job offer, which was really exciting. So I was like, okay, I don't have to do anything. I can just take this job and it'll be fine. But like we kind of like were talking about it more, and he kind of already had this like 5-year plan for me of like working for them as like an administrative capacities, and then going back and getting my master's like at some point down the line. And it just didn't really like sit well with me. I think just ultimately because I kind of like the idea of being like the expert for sustainability in the room, and I didn't really think that I would have grown enough as a person sitting having just some sort of admin job or like first year job as like somebody without any experience. And so that idea of just kind of getting off on the right foot and like kind of having a good place to jump off of in terms of like having a good business background just stuck with me. And I applied for grad school, and throughout the application process, I think it just solidified for me more that it was where I wanted to be. And then I think the pandemic was definitely a factor in that timing wise, but I knew before I think the pandemic happened that I wanted to be in the program.
Awesome. Thank you. And so Jackie, you and Andriana both stayed at the same school that you went from to undergrad. I know Andriana, you had your plan laid out from the get-go, but Jackie, did you apply to other master's programs or just the one at UVM?
Yeah, this Vermont was the only school that I looked into. I did look at other schools, but I didn't apply to any of the other ones. I looked at Columbia. They have a sustainable development program that I heard about through one of our teachers at semester in the city. And then I also looked at CSU. Colorado State University has a sustainability related program as well. I think that Columbia was too big just because there would be a lot of competition within like the student cohort. And then CSU's program didn't seem quite as like developed or strengthened. I didn't really want to be as much of a guinea pig within my program. Is kind of why I saw UVM's program as the most solid in that aspect.
Awesome. That's super helpful. Thanks, Jackie. Erica, I'm going to pick on you because I know you applied to multiple schools because I feel like I filled out several letters of recommendation for you. Can you talk us through your kind of process on choosing what schools to apply to and why you ultimately chose Simmons?
Yeah, so social work is already like very limited anyways, so you have to find a school that has, I think with like a lot of the programs, you have to find a school that offers what you want to do. And so I knew that I wanted to stay in the city for cost purposes. And I know a lot of graduate schools, like depending on where you go, don't have graduate housing. So that was like another thing that I had to consider. And then, so yeah, I applied to Bridgewater, Simmons, BC, and BU. Bridgewater might have been like kind of the farthest, but it's still close to where I live. So it's not like too bad. And then, so I originally wanted to go to BU because they had a social work program / Masters of Public Health, which you could do together in 3 years. But they kind of got messed up with their like admissions emails that got sent out late. But it ended up working perfectly for me because I chose Simmons because they offered 3 days in the field versus the other schools only offered 2 days. And for me personally, I'd rather be in the field and gain that experience. So I liked having that option of doing a 3-day versus 2 days. Simmons was also very cost effective. They gave me a scholarship, whereas the other schools didn't. So I was like, I need to take, all the help I can get. So that kind of played into my role in Simmons. And also, before I knew it was going to be online, Simmons is right in Boston, by the Fenway area, and like all the hospitals and a lot of other organizations are close by. So I was like, oh, that's great. Like, I work at Children's Hospital. I can like easily commute back and forth. That didn't end up happening, but the online platform is still really great. And I feel like they put a lot of effort into making sure we're still getting the same quality of education.
Awesome. That's super helpful. Thank you. So I'd love to, I guess, maybe, I know that Stephanie asked this question about Devin, but maybe we could hear from our panelists. Did you all do grad school interviews, and what were those like?
Clark doesn't have an interview process for 5th-year programs, and we didn't have to take the GRE either, which is great, which is like one of the biggest reasons why I decided to do grad school at Clark versus somewhere else, because I didn't want to have to go through that whole process.
That makes sense. How about Jackie or Erica?
Yeah, I think because of the pandemic, we didn't have the GREs. I also have a feeling that now that the pandemic is hit, it's going to accelerate the process of like fading out the GREs, just generally speaking. And we did have an interview process for me. It was one of the admissions counselors and the director of the program like randomly popped in at the last second. So it was very kind of like off the cuff. It felt like it wasn't, I prepared like hell with all the basic questions, but really I kind of just like shared my story, and then they asked me if I had any questions, and I wasn't quite as prepared with questions, and so I had to come up with some on the fly. But I think like the most important part of like an interview is really just telling your story in a way that you maybe necessarily didn't do on your application or your written letter, cover letter.
How about for you, Erica?
Yeah, I don't think I had to do an interview, and I don't know if this is social work in general or just the schools I applied to, but I don't think any of them, none of them required the GRE, which is also played into my decision to go to social work school.
That definitely makes sense. I feel like you all kind of answered this question, but if you can add a little bit more, I mean, I guess I'm wondering if you all really had an idea of what you want to do, in your career, and saw grad school as being a like necessary path to get to that, or are you more like, I know like the general realm of things I'm interested in, and you're using grad school as a way of kind of honing in towards that? I guess with like being a social worker, that is social work usually goes into being a social worker, but I'd love to just think here about your like thought process of your like, if you know what the end goal is and this is a path to that, or if you're just like trying to get some exposure and experience, and you want to land, somewhere in the general region that you're studying.
Go ahead.
I guess
Okay, I'll go. Oh, okay.
Sorry,
I was definitely.
Go ahead, Adriana.
I was in like the second group that you mentioned. I generally knew what I wanted to do. I'm really interested in like life coaching and communications, like graphic design, which are not really related, but the communications major itself can connect really easily to both of those options. So I wanted to do that to kind of like explore and get my network. And also like, I just wasn't ready to get into like the job market yet. So I wanted to keep going to school. And I think Edith knows this really well. I'm very like, I still don't know really what I want to do. And I think it's good though to keep your options open, because even if you think you know what you want to do, once you do it, you might not even like it. So it's good to like keep your options open.
Awesome, thanks. Jackie, how about for you?
I think I had to like convince myself that I knew what I was doing throughout the process. Like I think that was kind of like my first steps to actually thinking about what I would want to do. I think kind of like I said before, that feeling of really wanting to be at a business table and starting to have those conversations. Maybe not like quite on a small scale, just broader on more of like a systemic level. I kind of just knew like the general like area of change that I wanted to make. I think in that sense, like not necessarily the small business table, but maybe like some sort of larger decision making area. Like I've made a lot of connections in terms of like business to business groups, like groups that help make change in other businesses. And I was most excited about that when we were in semester in the city, and we had a lot of those sorts of groups come and talk to us. So that's kind of where I see myself right now. And I knew that before finishing my application. Maybe not, like I was still kind of contemplating it as time went on. But I think like the application process gave me a lot of opportunities to reach out to those sorts of people as well, like people in the program too, to hear about like their perspective on like similar interests to me.
Awesome.
Because like I think once you start reaching out to like some of the contacts in those certain programs, they'll try to connect you with certain students within the program, which definitely helps.
Perfect.
Ilona, can I add something there? I know I'm not technically on the panel, but I am also in grad school. And I have a much different trajectory than the one that our three panelists just talked about, because I waited 14 years to go to grad school. And I am actually, you know, had I gone right out of college, I would have a PhD in history right now, which would be lovely. That was my plan. But having waited and worked in admissions, I think I found higher ed as a place that I really like to be, and a place that I really like to, would like to continue my career in. And so I'm getting a master's in higher education administration. So taking the time to work too, I think can ultimately sort of change like where you land and what you do. And that's a totally valid choice as well.
Yeah,
I had gotten to the point where I wasn't even sure I was going to go back, and I was finally like, okay, I gotta do it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I waited a long time to even finish undergrad, much less grad school. And I think that there's benefit on both sides, right? Like there's some, especially, you know, during a pandemic when the job market's crazy, a lot of people are like, it's a good time for education. And then, you know, and I think that there's no harm to that, because as you know, evidenced, my degree was at CFSI, or the Master of Public Policy, and you might not see the direct connections between what I'm doing then, you know, what I was studying then and what I'm doing now, although I've been in the, you know, opportunity gap and economic empowerment the whole time. But would I have gotten this job at this pay without a master's degree? Even if it wasn't in exactly what I'm doing now, like maybe not, you know, so there's a benefit to that side. And also, I think it's really hard when you haven't worked to commit another 2+ years and probably $20,000+ to something that you still haven't tested out the theory of whether or not you're going to want that career full time. So there's definitely, I think, benefits on both ends between waiting and between going right after. Keep throwing questions in the chat. We'll have some time for them at the end. But next, I'm going to transition to introducing Dan Bromberg, who is the Director of Academic Programs and Associate Professor for the CFSI School of Public Policy at UNH. Dan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I agree with everything that was just said. I think, and I think, you know, it's part of a program's responsibility to help coach students into whether or not the program makes sense for you at this time, you know, to go forward with it, right? I mean, that's a lot of what I do on a daily basis. It's not selling a master's program. It's finding that if there's the right fit for students or not, and if they feel like this is going to help them, you know, pursue their career goals in an effective way, then, you know, you kind of talk about what that looks like. I'm going to share a slideshow just because it's easier for me to kind of cruise through that. So I think I could share right now. And I checked it out. So I will kind of cruise through this because it doesn't need to be as formal as a slideshow will be. And I'll just try to focus on a few of the key parts that I think would be helpful. That said, you know, as soon as I kind of cut it off, I'm happy to field questions. I'm happy to field questions throughout presentation as well. But this will just kind of keep me on task. So the nice part about the Carsey School, and I'll kind of talk about this and explain why, you know, the Carsey School, we're talking about this here as well towards the end. So there are really three aspects of the Carsey School, right? There are our academic programs, there's the outreach that we do, and there's research that we do. And at this point, our programs are super integrated with all three of those aspects. So New Hampshire Listens is a civic engagement organization that's out in the community doing pretty amazing work on a regular basis. So anything from, holding really challenging conversations around the opioid crisis to issues around justice to how we're dealing with the pandemic. And our students are engaging with that center on a pretty regular basis at this point. We have research in vulnerable families. We have research in community development and finance. We have demography research. We have economic research, and our students are engaging in that too, right? So there's kind of this nice synergy between our academic programs at this point and our various centers at the Carsey School. And we're always looking for opportunities for our students to engage. We really have 3 graduate programs, even though it says 4, right? The 4th is just a dual degree with a JD. So if anyone's interested in that, I'm happy to chat about it, but it doesn't tend to get too much interest. It's a long haul to do both of them. So the 2 that are probably most relevant, I would say, are the Master in Community Development and the Master in Public Policy. That said, I'll hit the Master of Public Administration as well, and I'll kind of hit them all relatively quickly. So the MCD program is what I kind of think of as your grassroots project management, working within a community, learning and understanding a community, and understanding how to walk through, a program or a project within a community. The unique aspect of the community development program is that it offers, let's see if I have it here. So you begin your capstone project immediately, which is typically it's kind of a culminating assignment in a program. It is in the MPP and the MPA. On day 1 of the community development program, you start designing your capstone project. And then throughout the entire, course of the program, you work with our faculty to not only build that capstone, but to implement that capstone project. So you're in the community, you're in the field working in whatever, specific area you're interested in. So whether it's sustainability or public health or community development finance, that's what you're doing the whole time. And then you're taking courses online, spread throughout the remaining academic semesters. So it's a pretty cool model. The MPA is more of that organizational perspective. So how do we run an organization and run a whole bunch of programs in the public or nonprofit sector? So it's comparable to what an MBA would be for the private sector, but it is, how do you do that with mission-driven organizations in super heightened political environments? So how do you kind of manage that organization when, dollars aren't necessarily always there to incentivize, and where there's a lot of politics to deal with? Our MPP is our most traditional program, I would say, in that, it's a cohort-based model. Most of our students, although this is changing slightly, go full-time. And when we launched this program, the director of our school really wanted to focus on the idea of strategic communication as being key to this program. The idea was that a lot of students come out with an MPP and are really good at analytics, which is an excellent skill to have, but they might present data to someone, and ultimately the political climate doesn't really allow for that at all to take place. So this idea of strategic communication really elevated to our curriculum, and it's now a dedicated track in strategic communication. Another nice aspect that we're playing with now is this idea of a graduate certificate added on to your MPP. So here are 6 that we've pulled out and we've mapped with our programs. These will take you 0 more time, 0 more dollars. And they essentially kind of play into the elective role of your MPP. But because they're designated grad certificates, you would walk out in the same time period with both a graduate certificate and your master's degree. And once again, same time, same cost. Here are a few of our graduates. I think Ilana, Sarah was with you, right? So our graduates are all over the place, to be honest. I think they're in every one of our delegates' offices at this point. Working in Massachusetts for, state legislature, working in DC, working throughout New Hampshire, working in Vermont, so pretty much throughout New England. I could talk about our admissions, but I think, Devin covered admissions pretty well. More than happy to give you guys further insight. Yes, we waive GREs. Yes, we waive application fees, right? All of that happens. You tend to just have to ask, right? And if we can do it, we'll do it. So sticker price is rarely what students pay. And in your particular case, I'll skip to this and I'll go back to that. In your particular case, so we offer a $5,000 education award to anyone that has completed a semester in the city. And I'll talk about that more in a second. But basically, we believe that when we have organizations where our missions are aligned, we want to partner with those organizations and support the service and the work that you all are doing. We do that with the Peace Corps. We do it with AmeriCorps. We do it with City Year. We do it with a few of the towns and cities around New Hampshire. Our goal is to support the work that's being done, not only in the public sector, but for the name of public service. And Semester in the City and the College for Social Innovation is a huge part of that. So we're thrilled to be able to do that and partner with Semester in the City. We also waive our internship requirement, knowing that you guys have really accomplished a good amount of that during your experience. And then this is the Changemaker Collaborative for those of you at UNH, you might be familiar with it. But basically the collaborative, and I mean, the truth is Semester in the City is run through the Changemaker Collaborative as well. It's a collaboration between the Carsey School, Paul College, and the UNH Sustainability Institute. And there are just loads of opportunities through the Changemaker Collaborative for students to engage in impactful, experiences and change throughout the region. Whether it be the Social Venture Innovation Challenge, which is going on right now, or our Sustainability Fellows program, just loads of information. And I would just encourage you to check it out on the website. And you're more than happy to reach out to any of those people on the screen, and we'll share all of that information with you guys after. So, I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to talk more generally about grad school if that would be helpful. I have a decent sense of schools of public policy and schools of public affairs across the country. So happy to kind of help out however I can.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. That was helpful, and excited to share the information that you provide with everyone, as well as your contact information if they have more questions. So I'm popping back through the chat, and anyone is open to answer any of these. I know my answer, the first one, is probably going to be a little different than some others, but I see way back, is the daily life of a graduate student different from the daily life of an undergrad student, and in what ways? Anyone on our panel want to jump in with that?
Yeah, so For me, it was very different because I was working a lot more during grad school. Um, I had a work study job and 2 internships my first semester in grad school. And then the following semester, I was working at CFSI. So, and also all of my classes were at night. So that was a very different adjustment. And I wasn't in any clubs anymore at school because those were just for undergrads. So it did feel very different. Like my social circle felt very different because a lot of my friends from undergrad weren't there anymore. And also just learning how to balance work and school at the same time. But I think doing semester in a city right before starting grad school really helped because I was doing my internship full time and taking like SITB and BAPS and stuff. So that helped set me up for working and school.
Definitely, definitely. This might be a good question for Devin, but do you think that if we are set on going to grad school, do you apply to dream schools, safety schools, and target schools, or is that selection process different from undergrad versus grad school?
I think do all three. I mean, don't sell yourself short. So don't apply to a school just because you think you might not get in, because I think especially with grad school, you never quite know. That said, so, if UC Berkeley is your dream school for whatever program, like go ahead and apply. That said, if you are definitely set on going to grad school, yes, I think you should have what I call targets and likelies, because we don't like the word safety school in college admissions. But yes, I would say you should have a list that has all three if you think that that's definitely your next step.
Yeah, that makes sense. Since you're already on the screen, do you have an idea of what the average cost for grad school applications are, or does it vary a lot from school to school?
It can vary a lot from school to school. I don't know the most expensive one I've seen. A lot of them I think tend to hover between $50 and $80. But yes, it can vary.
That sounds right. Awesome. So for anyone who's either applied to grad school or at any point, has anyone looked into external scholarships? And if so, what was that process like? And I'm assuming that means like outside of what is offered by the school itself's aid, any external scholarships to grad school. Does anyone have any input or thoughts on that? Yeah, Erica, go ahead.
So I didn't like really go looking purposely for external scholarships, although I definitely should have. But I was on Twitter and somebody had posted, yeah, right, most random place to find information. Somebody had posted a link to a bunch of different scholarships that you could apply for. So I clicked on it, I went to the websites, they all looked pretty legit. And I had the intention of applying to them, but I kind of forgot. But I would say you should definitely not be like me and definitely put in the work. That's my piece of advice, put in the work. And, a lot of the scholarships that I looked at, they like weren't even a lot of work per se. Like some of them were really creative and didn't require like writing a whole essay. So definitely, there's like so many different scholarships out there that like, I did bottom line, which I don't know if like people know what that is, but my bottom line counselor was always telling me, do the creative ones if you can, because they're super easy, and like $5,000, $1,000 always helps.
Absolutely. And I can say I did not look at any external scholarships, but depending on like anything, depending on the market, like sometimes there can be wiggle room. Like I think I actually negotiated a higher scholarship for my second year at college than I did my first year. I'm not quite sure how I did that. Maybe Dan knows, but there's oftentimes there is wiggle room, and higher ed is in a kind of a chaotic space right now. So I think I think the moral that I have for all of my education is like, even if it sounds crazy, you can always ask for something. So ask to have things waived, ask for more money, see if there's other ways that you can work it. And I also myself was able to do the fellowship program when I was in the Carsey school, which did reduce right? Did that, Dan, do you remember, did that reduce my tuition?
Yeah.
How did that work?
Yeah, so they're I mean, at least at CARSI. So first of all, I would say ask, right? I mean, most schools are going to have a scholarship program. I would say 95% of our students receive funding. You know, some sort of funding, right? It's 4,000 to 8,000, let's say, is somewhere kind of in the range that someone would receive. But we have students that receive full tuition scholarships, right? I mean, this isn't, you know, it's what we do, right? I mean, it's not this, like, it shouldn't be a hard ask because that's what our job is, right? So it's what we do on a regular basis. The fellowships at CARSI, essentially we pair you with a research center. And Ilana, since you finished, we actually do it across the university now. So faculty across the university can request a fellow. It's not a tuition scholarship, it's just paid work essentially, right? So you work 15 hours a week during the semester and you get paid $15 an hour. On top of that, we give tuition scholarships that are just direct towards your tuition. So with the two of them combined, it could work out reasonably well. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I would land there. The question after that, so any perspective on balancing cost of a program and experience, could you just say a couple more sentences about that? I'm trying to figure out exactly what that means.
Ellie, I think that's you. Do you have a little more? Are you saying is it worth spending the money versus not? Is Ellie still in here?
I'm right here, Elena. I think that's sort of what I meant. I think.
Oh, versus work experience.
Yeah, and then also just how to justify spending a lot of money on something, and how to make sure it's the right fit and the right experience at that time. That's probably a really loaded question. We can skip it, and Ellen and I can pick your brain another time.
Well, I mean, I think, look, so Edith said this after. A master's of public administration is the degree that I got, very flexible and useful for nonprofit leadership, right? There are degrees that are foundational degrees. And if you have a general sense of what you want to do, a foundational degree is rarely going to hurt you. If there's a niche that you want to get into, right? So Jackie, you want to get into sustainable business, right? I mean, it sounds like you landed in the right degree. But if your 3 to 5 year plan doesn't include something that specific, but you feel the need to be competitive, you should get a grad degree. I would argue looking at some of the more foundational degrees and then trying to specialize in those while you're there is a super helpful way to do it. And frankly, I mean, I'm still paying off my master's degree bills. I mean, the doctorate should be free, right? I mean, that's kind of the goal. But the master's degree, you're typically paying something for. And the question is, was it worth the investment? And, I mean, there are low interest rates. You're going to pay $200 for the rest of your life. And that's, I don't know. I mean, at some point you're okay with that.
Yeah, I think thinking about it on a more technical side, my program is accelerated. So it goes from August to August. And what a lot of people say in my program is the fact that it's accelerated cuts down on the amount of tuition money that you're going to be paying, because you're only paying for 2 semesters opposed to the traditional program, which is 2 times that amount of money or even 3 times that amount of money. So that's something to consider too in terms of what type of learner you are at the same time as well, though.
I would also add, so depending on where you work, right? If you're working and balancing a master's degree at the same time, there's a chance that wherever you're working might give you some money towards what you're doing. Part of my last class was paid for by Semester in the City's professional development budget. So yeah, Ellie, right, exactly. So the other thing I would say, and Dan said this essentially, but it depends on the degree. So for example, when I was straight out of college applying to PhD programs in history, my advisor from undergrad was like, you will not pay money for this. You should not pay money for this. You should not pay money for a PhD, especially one that's going to land you on the academic job market. So, it really varies from degree to degree what you should pay, and how and when.
Yeah, no, I think it's all kind of, your mileage may vary. And I think it depends too on whether you're looking for a job, a degree program that's more in the like traditional academic realm, or one that's more of a like professional master's where you're training for a specific job, right? So I think that having that idea in your head, knowing what you're going into is going to make a big difference in terms of what the dollar value is to you.
Mhm.
I have a question here. We talked about this a little bit in the beginning, but talking about schools that want at least 2 years of work experience. The question says, do you think that it would be challenging to get accepted as a senior applying to grad school? How do you create a strong application? I guess, Kevin, are you asking if you're applying to a school that says it wants job experience, but you don't have it, how is the best way to go about that? Is that what the question is?
Something along those lines. Yeah, like they might, they say that it's good to have it. Like they consider people that have it.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
they recommend coming with job experience. And I think that kind of touches on one of the things we talked about earlier too, is that it is the whether or not to go straight out of school or not. And I think that, I think focusing on that personal essay and definitely what experience you do have, if you've done 3 internships, especially an intensive one like semester in the city, and you're able to highlight that work and say, listen, like this wasn't just a 2-hour-a-week internship. Like I was 30 hours, I have job experience, I have work experience. This is why I want to do this. I think it's going to be the most compelling.
Yeah, and I would just say, and I have to teach at 6 o'clock, so I'm gonna have to hop off. My apologies. If they're recommending work experience, there's most likely a reason, right? I mean, like, and that's to some degree why I skimmed over the MPA. Like most students that come to me straight and say they want an MPA, I typically say, go get some work experience and come back and get your MPA. Just because the degree is built, at least our degree is built for kind of a working professional. And it's not like a hard and fast rule, but it tends to be what I would suggest. And just Casey, I'm happy to talk to you offline about the JD MPP whenever you want. So we'll share my info.
Yeah.
All right, take care, everyone. It was very nice meeting everyone.
Bye, Dan. And I do want to be respectful of everyone else's time too. So if anyone wants to hop off at any point, I will not be offended, but I'm happy to sit here and make up answers to questions for as long as, as anyone wants to. I did get a private message check question that was talking about from an employment standpoint, from a future employer's standpoint, what is the most important thing? Is it the name of the school or the prestigiousness of the school? Is it the type of degree? Is it your grades or the internship experience that you have involved in the program? I have an opinion. Devin, you look like you
have an opinion.
I have an opinion too. And I'm going to say that, to be totally honest, I don't think that it really varies based on what you're applying for, the sort of circles that people who work in that industry run in, what your employer's opinion is, where did they go to school? They might have a particular affinity for alums. That said, I think generally what matters is that you have a degree. No one asks for your transcript. Nobody sees your grades when you're applying for the most part. It's that you have the degree. And I can say from my own experience that it got to a point in my career where, despite the fact that I had all of the years of college admissions experience that I have, I know that I was not getting jobs because I didn't have a master's degree. And so I think that it's going to matter more that I have it than what it is and what grades I got.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that there are some, I mean, if you are looking to be, a lawyer at like a top 10 law firm, like, oh yeah, the school that you go to matters, right?
Yes.
But like, for most folks, I think just being like, I had the dedication to complete a graduate degree and I'm engaged on these issues and this is how I've displayed it. And like I said, obviously, like, I have an MPP, that was great, I love the work I did. I do not use it, you know, explicitly in this job, and I didn't need it in public policy to get this job, but to get hired at the like pay level, if we're just being frank, that I wanted to be at, the master's was what got me there. And I could have gotten it at UNH, or I could have gotten it at probably most places, and that would have been, for my case, not made that much of a difference.
I would like, can I just add something there? What you can usually see, I don't remember if this is required at the grad level, but you can often look at degree completion rates and employment percentages after program completion. Those are things that you might want to look at. Degree completion rates in particular at places that are not like your top 10 whatever grad schools, because there are a lot of places, particularly for-profit institutions, that are essentially more diploma mills than anything, and that have very, very low degree completion rates. And then you have a lot of debt for a degree that you didn't complete that won't help you. Yeah. So this is also my time to say, do not go to a for-profit grad school. Look and make sure the program that you are applying for is nonprofit, because for-profits have a vested interest in taking your money and the federal loans that you use for their program, and less of a vested interest in making sure that you actually complete a degree.
Yeah. So I think, you know, I agree with all that. And I think that when you're thinking about what school to go to, again, like, you know, I put my GPA on my resume because it's really high, and I don't know, I feel like that's cool. I don't know, but like, I don't think that it's necessary. I don't think that's what got me the job, right? So like, you know, I really think that when you're, just the same as when you're applying to grad schools, when you're applying to jobs, you need to communicate who you are as a whole person and sell that. So if you went to the cheapest, you know, community college degree program you could possibly from your master's, you got to sell why you did that, and why that, you know, what your experience is, and why you made that decision, and why that still makes you the most employable person that they would want to hire. You know, it's all about just kind of living your truth, as it were, and making sure that you're selling your story as well. We are a couple minutes over time, and I don't want to keep everyone's here. I will quickly, I'm looking through the chat, I think pass fails don't impact your GPA at all, right? Not at all.
It depends on the school.
They may impact your transcript, but I don't think they impact your actual GPA number.
No, at UNH it doesn't affect your GPA, so it'll go into like your credits, but it won't change your GPA at all.
Some schools will recalculate a GPA though, and some will assign letter grades for pass fail. Most don't, but it is something that happens occasionally. Coco, you asked about incompletes too. If you have a string of incompletes or a string of withdrawals, that doesn't necessarily look great. And you're going to want to explain that in an application. So for example, you know, we'd have students who applied and they were like, they withdrew from 4 classes. I read transfer applications for a long time. So let's say somebody was somewhere, they withdrew from 4 classes in a semester, but then, you know, you read their extra information and it's because their mom died, or, you know, something happened in their life that was just like a particular upheaval. They were having mental health struggles and they have since like done work on those. You know, if you have something on your transcript that you don't know if it's going to show up well, I think it's always better to explain it. And say like, this is what happened, this is why, and this is why it won't happen again.
Yeah.
Is important.
Yeah, and sometimes people say like, do the GREs to kind of help counteract that a little bit, is what I've heard.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question to what you just said, Devin. So in terms of like explaining that, is that in a space you would want to do that during like an interview? Would you want to do that like in a cover letter, like filling in the gaps? I know like filling in the gaps is something that you do want to do on your cover letter.
Yeah.
I also know that you don't want to make it too lengthy in your cover letter. So like, where would you fill in those gaps precisely?
It can depend. So some schools will actually have a question on their application that's like, is there some other thing you want us to know? That's a good place to put that. It could be in your statement of purpose if there's no other place to put it. You could bring it up in an interview. Somebody might ask about it. I don't know that I would stick it in a cover letter because I think you want your cover letter to be like peppy and excited and like, this is why I'm good, and not necessarily this is why I withdrew from 4 classes. But statement of purpose, extra additional information, even just like an extra letter that you include in your file, I think all of that is fine.
I also feel like before applying, if you're able to develop a relationship with someone in the admissions office
Yes.
by reaching out and emailing and saying, I have some questions, ask for an informational interview, that's going to be your best bet so that you've developed some rapport with someone before you've even spent the money to apply. And then at that point, you can apply, you know, thank them for their time, apply, and then write a special note to that person's direct email and say, hey, just so you know, I put in my application. I didn't know where to put this, but I had some like gaps I wanted to explain, and here's how I wanted to do that. And you know, nepotism or whatever is not the right word for it. Is not like the best way about to go about things, but it works to develop a personal relationship with someone. I recommend that no matter what you're doing. Like,
it's not nepotism unless it's your mom who's reading your application.
The vocab for the GRE didn't stick for me. I'm sorry.
But yes, that's called demonstrated interest. And some of you may have heard that when you did undergrad applications, and the same is true for grad school. Definitely like find out who might read your application and shoot them an email and make up a question that you can't find on the website.
Yes, absolutely. All right, folks. Well, I appreciate everyone taking a little extra time in their Monday evening to chat and learn about this. Expect an email from me probably tomorrow with a copy of this as well as links to information about Carsey. Carsey isn't the only school out there. There's a lot of grad schools, but it is, I think, the only one that's offering you $5,000 off your tuition. So we thought it would be a good opportunity to present to you. But Devin, myself, Dan, and I'm sure the panelists are happy to answer any questions as well. So I'll have our contact information in the email that goes out tomorrow. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Bye, guys.
Bye.